You're watching Oshkosh City Cable 10, your government channel.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a special presentation on stormwater management here in Oshkosh. Over the next hour, we're going to kind of go into some of the history of stormwater projects and problems here in Oshkosh, and then take a closer look at some of the projects that have been completed to help solve those problems. Giving the presentation today is James Rabe, Civil Engineering Supervisor for the City of Oshkosh. Thanks for joining us, James.
Thank you, Emily. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as always. And also Mathew Yentz here, Project Manager from Strand Associates. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
So my name is Emily Mikowski, Communications Coordinator for the City of Oshkosh. I consider myself a little bit of a stormwater novice, so I will be here to hopefully ask any of the questions that the average Oshkosh resident would have about this important topic. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Rabe here, and we can begin our presentation.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much, Emily. Some of the things we're going to be going over today, we're going to, kind of get into a little bit of the history of some of the flooding issues that we've had here in the City of Oshkosh. Talk a little bit about kind of the purpose and goals of our stormwater management program. Get into some of the various strategies that we use for reducing the impacts of flooding and improving water quality, and then go over some recent projects over the past 5 years or so. And as you can see, we're looking at Tipler Dry Detention Basin, big pump station over at Melvin Avenue, located in Menominee Park, the Clubhouse Area Detention Basin over by West Haven, the James Road Area Detention Basin, which just got finished up about a year ago, the Sawyer Creek Dredging Project, which is just in the final stages right now, and then one that anybody who's come to City Hall in 2013 is very familiar with, the City Hall Underground Detention Project. And then if you've got any questions or discussion afterwards, otherwise, anything that comes up that you want to ask us about as we're going through our material, just feel free to jump right in anytime.
Great.
All right, a little bit of the history. Some of the incidents that we've had since 1990, there have been 5 presidential disaster declarations. That's where, the President of the United States declares through FEMA that, the flooding is severe enough that it warrants a disaster declaration. We can see those were 1990, 93, 2001, 2004, and again in 2008. I think the 2008 one being the most recent, most severe event, is still kind of fresh in everybody's memory, even, almost 6 years later. Mm-hmm. Several other flooding incidents that were less severe, but, still were fairly widespread. 1996, a couple of them in 99, 2000, 2010, and again 2012. So you can see even in, the last 25 years, we've had numerous events that have caused widespread flooding in the city. Excuse me. Kind of some of the purpose and goals of our stormwater program. We're always trying to reduce the health and safety impacts due to flooding, both in the street and on private property. Street flooding impacts the ability of our emergency services, police, fire, ambulance service. If the streets are flooded, they can't get to somebody who might be in dire need of emergency services. It also impacts, healthcare facilities. We've got, Mercy, Oakwood, Aurora, and then we've got, numerous other facilities. Evergreen Manor is a senior assisted living facility over along Sawyer Creek. So there's a number of those type of facilities that have also, suffered from flooding over the past several years. And then again, all the other impacts to residential properties and other businesses within the city. Taking a look at, some of the more severe areas, we've got 9th Avenue, which is classified as a collector street, which, it's not a local residential street. It sees a fair amount of traffic. And Washburn Street, just south of 9th Avenue. You can see in these images, significant amounts of flooding to the point where, the streets really aren't passable. This Washburn Street location is maybe 1,000 feet from a fire station. So again, fire department access is limited by these street flooding incidents. Moving into some of the other facilities, healthcare facilities. Here we're looking at Sawyer Creek, adjacent to Mercy Medical Center at 9th and Oakwood. They've had instances where, they've had to deploy sandbags to try and, stop the creek waters from entering their facility. Again, Westfield Street over by Evergreen Manor, Evergreen Manor has had to spend a lot of time preparing for and responding to flooding during some of these major events. So
Doesn't even look like a street there.
no, it really doesn't. And,
It's like a river.
In fact, during the 2008 storm event, while I was out reviewing some of our flow drainage ways around the city during the storm and after the storm, we actually watched a couple of people park in the Mercy Oakwood parking lot and get their kayaks off the roof of their vehicle and put in at Mercy Oakwood and kayak down Sawyer Creek.
Oh my gosh.
So yes, it's it's pretty significant. And that amount of water, that volume of water, it's dangerous. You don't want people trying to do that because it is very dangerous.
You don't want to depend on your kayak for your morning commute.
Right.
No.
Right.
Now, you said that they have had to set up sandbags and everything to prevent the water from coming into their facilities. Have they ever had any kind of damage done?
I know Evergreen Manor has had a significant amount of flooding damage over the years. In my conversations with Ken Arneson from Evergreen Manor, they have had millions of dollars of damages, over the past 15, 20 years due to flooding. Mercy Oakwood, I believe, has had some damage as well. But like I said, they have, sandbags, and they have at times requested assistance from, the city crews to try and help them deal with some of the issues. But yes, to my knowledge, they have also had damage in their facility due to those flooding. So then, some of the other health and safety impacts and property flooding, here in the 2008 storm event, Canadian National train derailed on the south side of the city of Oshkosh, down by Johnson Avenue, just west of Main Street, Highway 45. You can see here, the train kind of tipped on its side, and while they were trying to right the train, they had to bring in a crane to pick it up. And on several instances, it was actually discharging diesel fuel into, the waterway. And when I arrived on site at that location, the Department of Natural Resources spill response coordinator and the Coast Guard were already on site dealing with some of the contamination issues from that derailment. So again, that's a very severe. The tracks were washed out, the train derailed, and there was a spill of diesel fuel into the water.
Yeah, and I don't think most people think about the fact that stormwater can get contaminated in that way. A lot of times you just think it's all this rain coming down and that's what you got to deal with, but then there's that whole other aspect of...
Yeah, and anytime that, you've got rain flowing even across the lawns and across the street, it is picking up other pollutants. Sure, in the case of the train derailment, you had a diesel spill, but, when water flows across the street, you're picking up dirt, dust, contaminants from your brake pads. Anytime you apply your brake pads wear, and it leaves a thin layer of that dust. Well, that is also heavy metal contamination. So that's some of the water quality aspects that we're trying to work on improving with all of our projects as well.
Okay.
And then again, you've got just the yard flooding around houses. This particular picture was taken from a resident's second-story window, and the water is just flowing down the street, flowing between the houses across the street. This was one of dozens of pictures that residents sent to us, from that June 2008 storm event. Again, into some more of our purpose and goals. In addition to trying to reduce the amount of street flooding and property damage, we're also trying to reduce the amount of clear water that gets into our sanitary sewer system. There's been a lot of talk about I&I, inflow and infiltration into the sanitary sewer system. That sanitary system is designed only to handle sanitary waste, so flushing your toilet, taking a shower, running your washing machine. Those are not high flow generation activities. So that sanitary sewer is only sized to handle that flow. The clear water inflow during storm events significantly overloads that system, and that's what causes basement backups. You can see here on the screen some images of a sanitary sewer overflow where the system is so surcharged it's actually coming out of a manhole cover in the street. And the other issue on the other side, you've got a basement backup where there was clear water overloaded the system, and clear water and sanitary waste all backed up into a basement and caused damage as well. So those are it's a different system, but in these heavy rain events, there is such an ability for the two to interact that, the stormwater system is really, we're trying to do our best to get that water off the street to reduce the impacts on the sanitary system. Another one of our goals that we briefly talked about is improving water quality. The Department of Natural Resources, the pollutant of interest that they look at is total suspended solids, or TSS. In general, all the other pollutants, the heavy metals, the phosphorus that runs off with your lawns and stuff, it tends to cling to the sediment particles. So the suspended solids is the pollutant that the DNR has chosen to try to model. And as we continue on, there's regulations in place now for phosphorus as well. But looking at the base load from the city of Oshkosh, we generate just under 2,000 tons of sediment a year in our stormwater system. To meet our 40% removal goal, which was in place by the state, there have been some changes, but that's still kind of a goal that we're looking at. And we need to remove just under 800 tons per year. Right now, with all the practices we've got in place, the detention basins that we've built, the street sweeping, because that's picking up all that sediment off the gutter of the street. Some of our streets that are still rural sections where there's a ditch. Practices like the biofilters we installed out here in the City Hall parking lot. Those are all a number of practices that serve to remove those pollutants.
So it's kind of a proactive thing. You're trying to get rid of the pollutants before they have a chance to get into the stormwater. Is that correct?
As soon as the stormwater hits the surface and starts to flow across the surface, it's picking them up.
Yes.
So street sweeping, yes, that's a proactive approach, trying to get those pollutants off the surface before the water picks them up.
Okay.
Once it's in the stormwater, then detention basins, biofilters, those types of things are trying to remove those
filter those out.
pollutants from the runoff. Yes.
Got it.
We're right now, our practices are removing about 530 tons per year. So we've still got about 120 tons in our planned projects and about another 120 to go to meet our goal. One thing to keep in mind, Lake Butamore, the Fox River, and Lake Winnebago are considered impaired water bodies by the Environmental Protection Agency. As such, the EPA has mandated the DNR to do an analysis which is called a total maximum daily load. What that does is it says, this water body is capable of assimilating this amount of sediment without causing it to not meet its, recreational purposes.
Okay.
So the Fox River, for example, it's boating, fishing, so there's a certain amount of sediment that the river can assimilate and still be, clean enough for those recreational purposes. Okay. So with the total maximum daily load, or the TMDL as it's often referred to, it says, this water body can only take this amount. Then the analysis says, well, we'll say, just for throwing a round number out, it can take 200 tons per year. But City of Oshkosh, you're putting, 2,000 in. Well, you got to reduce that. So that's what that analysis does. And we know they've started the analysis on the Upper Fox. We expect in about early in 2015, we should be seeing some preliminary load allocations to tell us where we're going to be getting to. And by late 2015, early 2016, we'll be given a requirement that we have to start working towards.
Okay, and you've made some progress as far as removing 40%, it says, of your goal. Not quite there yet. Would you still kind of say that you're on track here?
Yeah, I think, every time we do a project, we're always looking, to maximize our water quality improvements. For example, the Armory Area Detention Basin, which got under construction early May 2014, it's primarily a flood reduction project. However, through some extensive permitting coordination with the Department of Natural Resources and the Army Corps of Engineers, we were actually able to get that site permitted to be able to remove close to 50 tons per year of sediment. So it took us a lengthy amount of time to coordinate that permit, but we were able to get it permitted, so we were able to get a significant amount. So, that 120 tons that you see up there for planned projects, 50 of that is right in that Armory project.
Excellent.
So, yeah, we're always looking for ways when we're doing a project to also improve water quality, because it is less expensive to do both at the same time than it is to do one and then come back and try to retrofit to do the other later.
Definitely. Great.
A little bit more about our purpose and goals. We'll kind of try to fly through this a little bit. You know, you will hear us as design engineers refer to a 10-year design storm. Really, that is a storm that has a 10% chance of happening in any given year.
Okay.
So you could roll the dice and roll 10% 5 years in a row and get 5, 10-year storms in a row. So what we're trying to do is, keep that storm sewer system, keep that runoff completely off the street and in the storm sewer system.
Okay.
Getting into what we refer to as a 25-year design storm, which has a 4% probability of happening in any given year. We're trying to keep, the center of that road dry. So the gutter and the parking lanes, there's going to be water standing there, but we're trying to keep that center clear so emergency vehicles can get in and out. So, somebody gets off of work and it's been raining all day, well, they can still get to their house. But yeah, there's going to be some water standing in the street.
Still drivable.
Right, still
Okay.
drivable. And then that 100-year design storm, or that 1% chance, really, we're just trying to contain that in the right of way and keep it from getting out and impacting other properties.
Excellent. And one question I know I had when we were briefing was, what exactly do you consider the right of way? Starting at the sidewalk, which end of the sidewalk, or at the terrace?
Really, generally speaking, in the city of Oshkosh, the right of way is from the back of sidewalk or your house side of the sidewalk, all the way to the back of sidewalk or the house side of the sidewalk on the other side of the street.
Okay.
So the sidewalk is completely contained within the street right of way.
All right, so pretty much up until your property line right there.
Right.
Okay.
Some of the various strategies that we go through, every watershed is unique, and what works in one might not work in another one. So really meeting our goals starts with a detailed planning level analysis, or what we refer to as a stormwater management plan. And then as we're going through the plan preparation, the strategies are reviewed and, for each watershed as we're going. We look at, kind of an urban multi-use dry detention basin, which corresponds to the Tippler detention basin we're going to talk about. We've got a large pump station. Here in the city of Oshkosh, our strategy is really avoid pump stations if at all possible, because when do you need the pump station to work? During a storm event. When is the most likely chance the power is going to go out and the pump station's not going to work? During a storm event.
Good point.
So one of our fundamental beliefs is gravity always works. So try to convey the stormwater with gravity when at all possible. As an absolute last resort, we'll go to mechanical or pumping, because that's the time it's going to go out is during a storm, and that's when we need it the most.
And the other ones look a lot nicer than the pump station as well.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's very expensive. That is another good point. Thank you, Matt. It's the Melvin Avenue pump station. We'll talk about it a little more, but it was a very expensive project. But it was the only option for that watershed.
Okay.
Traditional detention basins, something like the West Haven Clubhouse area basin, the large scale projects, the James Road project. That site sits on 55 acres of land. It's a very large project. Some channel conveyance upgrades, the Sawyer Creek dredging project is a prime example of that. The large-scale underground detention, again, anybody who came to City Hall in 2013 was well aware of what went on there. And, anybody who visited our website too, I want to, extend a thank you to you and your staff for all the time and effort that went into, being able for us to live broadcast that project out on the internet. That was huge. And then, storm sewer conveyance, anytime we're doing a project, we're trying to put in larger conveyance just to get that water off the street.
Oh, great.
Getting into kind of some of our recent projects, I'm going to turn this first one over to Matthew. I think you've listened to me for long enough for now. Matt was the design engineer for the Tippler Dry Detention Basin, so I'll turn this phase over to Matt to give a little more information about that.
Great. So the Tippler Dry Detention Basin is literally right behind Tippler Elementary School. Middle school, excuse me. In such a developed urban area, large open pieces of property are hard to come by. Schools are great places to look for large open areas, but we don't want to take away all of their recreational their soccer fields, their athletic fields or whatnot. But working through the school, this was our multi-use detention basin, and what we were able to do is depress all of the area behind the school to temporarily contain the stormwater. We did put in an underground drain tile system to get that athletic field back into use for them more quickly. Obviously, it got flooded and it needed to stay that way. It probably was wet for 48 hours, probably not usable for about a week.
And that's the difference between a traditional detention basin and a dry detention basin. Is the dry one, it's still level land, it's kind of flooded for a couple days or so, but eventually it goes back to a field.
Yes, correct. Dries right back out. And when we're utilizing school property for such a thing, we really want it to get back to that school use as quickly as we can. And that's really what we did here. And this was an area that was experiencing significant flooding. I think the property actually flooded before, not to the same extent, but there was a lot of water coming here, and it really did help a lot of the people in that urbanized area.
Yeah, that athletic field routinely flooded during major events, and in all honesty, whereas with this project, it's usable in a week maybe, it was a month in some of those other events prior to this project before they could get back out and use it.
Yeah. The other thing, we had to do some conveyance upgrades. So the storm sewer pipes upstream of the basin had to be improved so that we could get the water there more quickly.
Okay, and that's what conveyance is.
Conveyance is just simply where we pick up the storm water in an inlet, it gets into the pipe and then gets conveyed somewhere, piped
Redirected.
Redirected.
Yes, okay.
And so then it was discharged into the detention basin.
Great.
But those conveyance systems upstream were as important as our ability to detain it in the basin as well.
Excellent.
So the approximate construction cost was about $600,000. You did benefit significantly from the 41 work going on at the time. Typically, the excavation of the material would have been far more expensive, but that dirt or that material was needed on the 41 project. So the contractors were really willing to come in and dig it out. I don't want to say for free, but at a very reduced rate because they needed the dirt out on the 41 project.
Perfect timing.
The DOT was paying contractors to find dirt, primarily for constructing the Butamore Causeway. There was a lot of dirt that went into that construction. So the DOT was paying contractors to find the dirt. So then, they were, bidding our projects at a quarter of the excavation costs we would have seen otherwise, because they were getting paid on that side by the DOT and getting paid by us as well. So they were able to, we were able to see significant cost savings on our projects that took place at that time.
Everybody kind of wins. You're looking for somewhere to put it, and they're looking for somewhere to take it. So,
correct.
Yeah.
And we had, there is good dirt and bad dirt. So our dirt was clean and compactable.
Okay.
It wasn't marsh or swamp, and it wasn't contaminated. So it was usable dirt for them.
Excellent.
So yeah,
it's a very good point. You can't, not everything that you dig out is able to be used for placing fill like they needed on the 41 bridge. The clay that we were excavating was very good structural material, so they could excavate it, take it out on the 41 Causeway and place it and compact it or beat on it so it got hard enough that you could build Highway 41 on top of it.
It's not going to cave under.
Right.
Yeah.
If you were just digging, swamp mud out, you can't build on that, But the stuff we were generating was, very good structural material for the DOT.
Wow.
right.
All right, moving on to the Melvin Avenue Pump Station project. Here you can see, the pump station is located just off the east end of Melvin Avenue in Menominee Park. For those that play softball in Menominee Park, it's just north of the Reitz Diamonds. So it's very visible location, but very, very important and very functional. Some of the images you see here, during and then after construction of the project, kind of gives you a scale of the work that was taking place. The Melvin Avenue watershed itself is only about 105 acres, so not a very large watershed, but it is completely developed in urban development. There's no open space. So in order to do a traditional detention basin, which was one of the alternatives we analyzed, would have meant purchasing and demolishing several homes to construct the detention basin. So in this case, we did look a lot harder at some of the other alternatives. There was significant flooding in the watershed, and the low point in this watershed, which is right at the intersection of Melvin and Evans, the street elevation is only about 6 inches above the Army Corps regulation for the lake level for Winnebago for boating season. So there, any amount of water in that intersection at Melvin and Evans would flood because it just couldn't get off the street because it was impacted by the lake level so much.
Right, right.
Some of the people that had lived there for a long time, as we were meeting with them, they would joke, the neighborhood kids go fish in the street inlet because there's fish in it, because there's that much water impacted from the lake.
Or you see ducks swimming in the puddles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
As I mentioned, we did look at a lot of alternatives for this project. Traditional detention basins, strictly doing storm sewer upgrades, the pump station. Really the best alternative for us was that large pump station with some very significant storm sewer upgrades. There is a 4-foot high by 8-foot wide box culvert storm sewer underneath Melvin Avenue that conveys the water to that pump station. That pump station has a design capacity of 180 cubic feet per second, which is approximately 81,000 gallons per minute.
Wow.
Another way to think about it is that design capacity is the same as the wastewater treatment plant's design capacity for the entire city of Oshkosh. So this is, for only a 100-acre watershed, this is a very significant structure. As we talked about, gravity always works. We're trying to avoid this. The way we kind of mitigate that potential is we do have a natural gas backup power generator installed at that facility. So should the power go out, the backup generator will automatically kick in. The controls in the station will sense when the power went out and will automatically fire that generator up so the station's immediately back online.
Yeah, that does alleviate the worry that if the power would go out, which it often does during a large storm event,
right,
you wouldn't have to worry about that breaking down. How long has this pump station been in use for?
The pump station was completed in the fall of 2010.
Okay,
so about 3.5 years now.
Yeah, and it's been working great since you've installed it?
Yeah, it really has. We've been working, the staff at the wastewater treatment plant are also the staff that maintain all the sanitary pump stations. So they have working knowledge of this type of equipment. So they're the same staff that monitor this pump station at Melvin Avenue. The station is also, via radio communication, communicates back to the wastewater treatment plant because that facility is manned 24/7, 365. If something happens at the pump station, the staff operating the wastewater treatment plant know about it immediately and can dispatch service staff to the station to go out and analyze the problem and get the station back operational.
Wonderful.
So yes, it is always, shall we say, monitored in that regard. Our staff also, they go out, they run that generator once a month just to make sure it's going to work when we need it.
Have you needed to use it yet?
To my knowledge, we have not had an outage during a storm event that's impacted that station. But, like I said, you don't want to find out when the power goes out that your backup generator doesn't work. So that's just a matter of our operating procedures as they go out and they test run that generator every month.
Great.
The video here is really looking at kind of a before and after of the Melvin Avenue watershed. So the flooding extents that show up on screen, the green is kind of, like 0 to 3 inches, going up, orange, yellow, or yellow, orange, red being up over a foot of, flooding at the surface. And we're kind of looking at a before and after of, the storm sewer improvements and the pump station in place. It should be noted that for this watershed, our critical design storm is really a 30-minute duration. So this 25-year design storm, or this 4% probability, is about 1.6 inches of rain in 30 minutes. So that is a very intense storm event.
And you can really see the video really helps to show the difference. I mean, it's amazing to have them side by side like that to compare because you see the red areas completely change.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
And then again, going into the 100-year storm or the 1% probability, this is 2.35 inches of rain in 30 minutes. That is, almost beyond comprehension.
That's cats and dogs.
Yes, I say almost because when we do look back at like the 2008 storm event, we were seeing intensities very close to this for short periods of time. So this is a very significant storm event. But again, you can see, with the video changes, there's a significant difference in the before and after. These videos are generated from our modeling software. But as we work through these analyses, we go back and we look at an actual storm event, like say the June 2008, and we run those existing conditions in the model, and then we look at that and say, does that reasonably reflect the amount of flooding we saw in this watershed? That's kind of our quality control or our quality check on our model. And then sometimes it requires a little bit of, okay, that doesn't quite look right. So we go back into the model and, find some things that, needed to be set up a little differently. But generally, we're seeing, modeling results that are very closely mimicking those actual storm events.
Great.
That's something we do with all of our analyses.
Provides great confidence in the design or the solution. When we go to the public with a solution that costs literally millions of dollars, and we can show them this is what it is without it, this is what it is with it, it is very powerful. And especially if after it's constructed and there is a storm event, they truly see those same results.
It's almost prophetic, you see it, and when it does happen, it's exactly as you said it would
Correct.
be. Now, this pump station hasn't been around for too long. Has there been a 10 or a 25-year storm since we've installed that?
I would say the storm event from 2012, that May 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that time frame, that was somewhere around a 25-year, a little bit more than that.
Okay.
And really, we did, Melvin Avenue in that area, there was not water on the street. And we've talked to some of those property owners that, were right there at that intersection. They were some of the ones that really instigated moving this particular street reconstruction and this particular watershed analysis up, because, they were seeing so many issues, and, they were making us aware of the issues that they were experiencing. And that information is really helpful for us for planning. And, so as we've gone back and talked to them, they've said, hey, it's a lot different now.
You definitely noticed a difference.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
And here we can see, the pump station project itself was about $3.1 million. The storm sewer work in Melvin Avenue and going upstream all the way across the railroad tracks to, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the street, just west of the railroad tracks. But that storm sewer work was about another $2 million.
Okay.
So in this 100-acre watershed, we've put in excess of $5 million worth of construction projects into this watershed.
Wow.
To really deal with this challenges of this watershed.
And it's amazing the amount of progress that you've made. I mean, I've only been in Oshkosh for about a year now, and just hearing from the city manager and from other city employees how bad it's been, a decade ago, and the progress that we've made, it's just amazing. After all the construction, it's all worth it. So
we've got a long ways to go, though.
It's an ongoing effort.
It really is. One of the analogies I use a lot is, it took us 150 to 200 years to get to the point where we were at. We're not going to be able to fix that in 5, 10, or even 25 years. But as long as we can continue to make, significant steps forward each year, I think everybody's going to see the end results. Right now we're seeing specific areas that, are really saying, wow, this has worked great for me. But then a guy 10 blocks over where we haven't done anything yet, hey, come on, I'm still underwater here.
Why is my basement flooded? Yeah.
So there's a lot of that yet. And, it's like I said, we can't fix it all in 5 or 10 or even 20 years.
Right.
It's going to take time. Moving on, another project we've kind of mentioned a little bit throughout the project or the presentation here is the West Haven Clubhouse Area Detention Basin. This is located immediately south of the West Haven Golf Course Clubhouse. You see West Haven Circle just to the west of the project. Throughout several of those storm events and leading all the way into the 2008 storm, there was significant flooding in this area. The residents inside West Haven Circle, their basements were full of clear water. It wasn't a sanitary sewer backup. There was just that much water on the street and in their yards that it actually got to a level where it overtopped their basement windows and ran into their basements. So
it's a lot of flooding.
Yes, very significant.
And this is a regular detention basin.
Yes, this is a traditional wet detention basin, if you will. So there's always a permanent pool of water. During small storm events, the ones that really pick up a lot of that sediment off the street, by sitting in this permanent pool of water, it allows those sediments to settle out. Eventually, we're going to have to go in and dredge that, but it's removing those sediments and cleaning up the runoff. And then, for the larger volumes for the large storm events.
So for a lot of people like me, if I'm just driving past, I could just think it's a pond.
Yeah, there's always water in it, yes.
Okay.
A little bit more, the West Haven Clubhouse area basin, it's really uniquely located kind of where Sawyer Creek and Campbell Creek kind of overlap in their watersheds. It's about a 270-acre watershed that, depending on the storm sewer capacity along Highway 41, the runoff will either cross Highway 41 into Campbell Creek, or it will continue north into Sawyer Creek. So it really can go either way depending on which system has more capacity. And as we mentioned, there was a lot of flooding in this particular area. Again, here looking at a video of a before and after. In this case, rather than looking at a design storm, we are actually looking at the modeling from the June 2008 storm event. So that real event that caused all the flooding in this particular area.
This is not an estimate. This is the real
This
outcome?
is the modeling results of the real storm event.
Got it.
So, we obtain the rainfall data from Whitman Regional Airport.
Okay.
We enter the actual rainfall data into the computer model. This June 2008 storm was preceded, in the 4 or 5 days prior by several inches of rain. So the ground was already saturated and couldn't take any more runoff or couldn't absorb any more water. So everything ran off. So the model calibration takes all of those things into account. And
visualizes it for you.
Right.
Okay.
And this, the before the June 2008 is really showing what happened in that storm event. And then on the other side is after the storm sewer project and the detention basin project, what would have happened if those improvements had been in place during that event. And again, in those, in this area, several of the residents inside the West Haven Circle have commented to us. That project was constructed in 2011, so those 2012 storms, we really did hear a lot of positive things from that neighborhood as well. Construction project cost about $1 million, and that included some significant storm sewer conveyance upgrades to help further reduce the flooding in the area. With that, I'll turn it back over to Matt for the James Road project.
Great. The James Road Detention Basin is the large-scale rural detention basin project. It's difficult to grasp how big this detention basin is. Again, James had mentioned it's on a 55-acre site. And it's really at the doorstep of the city. I would consider the city really beginning at the intersection of Clareville and 20th, and you can see we're just upstream of that in Sawyer Creek. So we're able to catch about 2,500 acres, not a 100-acre watershed like Melvin, but 2,500 acres of rural area into this basin, slow down that storm surge, if you will, before it gets into the city.
And that's the positive of having this wide open space to be able to do that.
Oh, absolutely. There's just a few images of the construction, but again, the whole watershed of Sawyer Creek is about 10,000 acres, but it really necks down, and only about a third of it is within the city or developed, and about 2/3 of it are rural and agricultural. But there has been significant flooding throughout the watershed, tremendous, history. So there was definitely a problem that needed to be addressed, and this rural detention basin did an amazing job of it. Like I said, about 3,000 acres are tributary to the basin. The storage capacity is 250 acre feet, and an acre foot is literally that. It's 1 acre of land, 1 foot deep of water. An acre of land, I usually try to equate it to about a football field, including the end zones, is about an acre, roughly. So it'd be 250 football fields, 1 foot deep of water.
Wow.
It's amazing. So we did this all in about a 40-acre footprint of the basin. So the average depth of the water when it's full is about 6 feet. The total construction cost was about $2.6 million. including the land acquisition, it was 3.6. And you were fortunate to receive a community development block grant for this emergency action program of about $1 million, which offset your cost. We moved, in order to do this, we moved 400,000 yards of dirt. This was really just a major earthwork project with a control structure to basically slowly release the water after we captured it.
Okay, and this was the DOT available to take that dirt off your hands in this case?
In this case, no. We took this dirt and moved it to another city-owned parcel for future industrial park expansion.
Perfect.
And put it in there for grading of that site, made it more developable or user-friendly to an industry that might want to come in and use it in the future.
Great.
Yeah, so really it was, not only, filling the parcel, but also leveling it. The existing land slopes were fairly steep, so if you're going to, if somebody's going to come in and try and develop it, it would be a challenge, and they would have to find a lot of material to do that. So with this project, we were able to set up an off-road haul route. So the contractor did not need to use the licensed trucks. They could use off-road trucks, which haul a lot more material because they're not subject to the weight restrictions of our road system. So yeah, they were able to move it about 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile, I think it was, off-road.
Okay.
Correct.
And then place it at this other location and compact it so that we don't see a lot of settlement. And then let Mother Nature kind of finish the compaction for us over the next several years.
Very cool.
We were fortunate that the two sites were contiguous so that they didn't have to go out on the road to get to the other one. And that actually was a tremendous cost savings. I would say our dirt moving activity cost per yard went from, say, $8 to $10 a yard to $2 a yard.
Really?
And when you're moving 400,000 yards,
That adds up.
It's a dramatic cost savings.
It really, the costs ended up being very similar to our other projects where the DOT was taking the dirt. We ended up seeing a very similar type of cost savings by being able to do all the material hauling off-road.
Wow, great.
It's a very interesting project. The Sawyer Creek dredging project, or channel improvement project, extended from Keller Street, or 41, to the Fox River. It's about 7,000 feet, or just over a mile.
Another interesting project.
Very. And through numerous public involvement or informational meetings that the city had, there was an interest to see what effect dredging or improving some of your already natural conveyance systems might do to help relieve the flooding.
Yeah, and maybe if you want to describe to us a little bit what exactly is dredging for someone. I mean, I have no idea what dredging is when I first hear about it.
Sure. Over time, sediment falls out of the water and accumulates on the bottom of the channel. And it's the muck. So when anybody were to step into the lake or the river and you feel that squishy muck on your feet, that's what we dredged out of there. Once you get down deep enough and you're onto the hard, natural bottom of the channel, that's no longer sediment.
Okay.
So we didn't dredge much of that out. But really it was the soft sediment that we dredged out. And again, this 10,000 acre watershed coming into Sawyer Creek, there's a lot of sediment. In fact, we removed about 40,000 cubic yards of sediment out of the channel. That's amazing. Which is actually equal to your...
It was actually roughly equal to the excavation for the West Haven area detention basin. So when we constructed the West Haven detention basin, we removed about 40,000 yards of dirt. So the Sawyer Creek dredging project, it's hard to visualize what 40,000 yards is, but for those people that were in and around the West Haven detention basin when it was being built, all the dirt we dug out of Sawyer Creek could have filled that hole back up.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And that was all sediment?
All sediment.
Okay.
Yeah. And there were actually 3 very unique sections to the channel that you can see here. The upper reach was very ditch-like. In fact, it was a ditch. It was man-made. It was artificially dug to realign the creek to allow some development to occur up there, years ago.
The former Kmart site.
And then
or Sears for those who haven't been around the city for too long.
Sure.
People like me, yeah.
Sure. Once you got downstream of that, or you got near the Westfield Street area, it became a very nice meandering stream in this middle section. There were overhanging trees. It was not a straight alignment that meandered around. Then when we got further downstream, once we got past like Eagle Street or Red Arrow Park, it opened up into a pretty open channel, and that's where people have been boating, and there's piers along the channel, and so all three of them we dredged in, but we treated them all differently.
Okay.
So some of the dredging was done in the dry, so we actually cofferdammed off and dewatered the channel and took the excavation equipment down in and dug it out with traditional mechanical excavation.
A backhoe and a dump truck.
A backhoe and a dump truck. In areas where it was wet dredging, we used a hydraulic dredge, which is a unique, sophisticated piece of equipment, and that probably did the majority of the work, to tell you the truth. I would say 25,000 yards were hydraulically dredged and 15 were mechanically dredged.
Can't empty out the whole thing and do it dry.
No. But in that upstream section where it was narrow, and there was, basically we were able to dam it off and get that water out much easier than we could, like the lake type piece down below.
Yeah, and I think we've got some graphics coming up too, Emily, that will describe it a little bit better for you.
Great.
Yeah. There was a couple of things that we did to get our permit, and that was mitigate the impacts to this natural resource. Waters of the state, they're for everyone. And when we come in and we were going to dredge, the DNR looked at that as an impact to the natural resource. So they wanted us to, mitigate that. What could we give back for the being able to go in? And so we did stabilize some heavily eroded banks. We constructed fish habitat in 2 separate locations along the creek. And then we removed an amazing amount of invasive species or buckthorn within Red Arrow Park. And that dramatically changed that park. Anybody that's out there, will know what we're referring to when you see it.
And I think we also have some more pictures coming up a little bit later to kind of show a before and after of that. But yeah, I know we got a lot of comments from a number of people with just the dramatic change they saw immediately with the park.
Right, and it's so interesting because it's not only a stormwater project at that point, it's so much more than that with all those extra things.
Yeah, there's some ancillary benefits to it for sure.
Uh-huh.
So this is our proposed channel section. The lighter gray material is the sediment that was dredged out. The red line, it's a little hard to see, maybe the dark line is the trapezoidal section that we tried to create.
Okay.
All right. Some of this area down in the bottom that's cross-hatched, it's tan gray. That's parent material that we did remove just in order to make sure that we had enough area or cross-section of the channel to convey the amount of water that we wanted to.
Okay, so parent material, not sediment.
Correct.
It's the hard stuff you're kind of carving into the parent material.
Yeah, and we didn't do much of that, but there were a few high points in the channel that we wanted to scrape down just to give it a uniform cross-section as it, flowed down towards the Fox.
Okay.
And I think one important thing to point out while we're looking at this image too, you can see near the banks, our dredging area stops short of the bank. So you can see that, the area right near the banks, we did not remove the sediment from. And that was actually, again, one of the negotiated items with the Department of Natural Resources, because by leaving this sediment in the very near bank area, you're able to promote this aquatic vegetation and provide habitat for fish and amphibians in that very near shore area. So, that was, some people might say, well, why don't you just go right from bank to bank? Well, that was one of the, negotiated items that we had with the DNR in order to get the permit to do the project.
Right. And that sediment is a natural part of a channel.
It is. It also provides an erosion protection.
Yeah.
If we were to dredge right tight to the bank, the velocities in the channel would have been greater. The water has to slow down if there's that emergent vegetation. So it does provide some erosion protection, and then leaving that soft sediment allows all of the turtles basically to burrow in and hibernate in that soft sediment in the winter.
Great.
So
something you don't really think about when you're thinking of a project like this.
Correct.
So DNR is always there to remind you of
the environmental end of it was interesting.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too, when we first reached out to the Department of Natural Resources, to talk about this project, we first said, hey, we're looking at this. We want to come in and meet with you and kind of lay out. I think they were at first very, I don't necessarily want to say adversarial, but very close. Because they thought at the time they thought we were ready to start work, I think. And we sat down in that first meeting with the DNR, and I think they had about a dozen of their staff at this initial meeting. And we sat down and we started laying out our back of the napkin almost sketches of what we were looking at. And that first meeting was probably 2.5 to 3 hours. But by the end of that meeting, I think the department had a very good sense that, this is just the beginning planning that we were at. And I think they really felt a lot better about the discussion that we had, and some of the give and take we were able to give them. Hey, okay, you want to leave 10-15 feet for the vegetation and the habitat for the aquatic and amphibian species. It doesn't. It didn't make a big impact on our conveyance. So it was it was very, I don't necessarily want to say easy, but it was something that, what, that's what you want? Perfect, we can do that.
A nice kind of collaboration, everybody, again, everybody kind of wins with that situation.
Right.
I think they have had years of people coming in and just wanting to dig a ditch. And I think that their initial impression when we said we wanted to dredge 7,000 feet of Sawyer Creek was, we're not turning Sawyer Creek into a ditch. And I think that might have been their impression. And once they understood what we were trying to do and how we were going to stabilize these eroded banks and put in some of these other features, they were on board, and they were actually quite helpful.
And these before and after pictures we have here are amazing. It just looks beautiful.
Correct. This is in a section where we did dewater the channel. So if we look at the before picture, scale's always a little hard, but that's probably a 2-foot drop off. That bank has been just cut in. The concrete pad that dumpster that you can see in the background is sitting on was literally cantilevered out over the bank. All the soil from underneath it had been eroded away.
Yeah, the bank in this area, standing where that picture was taken, if you would take about 3 steps to your right, you would probably fall 8 feet down into the water. Wow. It's about an 8-foot vertical in some cases.
It was very steep sided, yes. The during construction, there's no water because
so interesting to see that.
It's all out. And what you see there are boulders, and that we did a vegetated boulder revetment to stabilize the bank. So first it was cut back to a uniform slope. There was a buildup of some other materials, but then we ended up filling that all up with topsoil and then driving a stake through the boulders into the natural soil again and planting a woody vegetation, such as a dogwood. And that's what you can see in this after picture. In the near side, that's actually some willow, the bright yellow. We planted that as well, and that's growing up like through the boulders. And the same thing on the far side. The white strip is really just kind of the bottom boulders that are still exposed from the water.
That's really nice.
But when we were done, it was, again, a very dramatic improvement. It took something that nobody wanted to see. It was ugly.
Kind of dangerous, too.
Ugly, dangerous, for sure. For sure. And I don't know that it's an amenity, but it actually is. It's quite nice. Yeah. And the adjoining property owners were very complimentary of what was done. Wonderful. I had mentioned the fish habitat, and this is an illustration of what we had done. So the natural bottom probably would have been about like where the base of the tree is, or the lowest elevation of the tree. And then we dug a hole below that, and actually the one that's right near Red Arrow Park actually is 13 feet deep. So the water is very, very deep. I mean, and it's great for the fish. We put these trees in there that overhang out into the water, and then we put boulders down. Kendall Kampke, who was our DNR fisheries biologist, really helped us put this together. And it turned out so well. I can't wait to see kids that can come into the park and can fish from the bank right there. Right. And if you know the before condition, I mean, it was just an algae
There was
swampy.
only about a
Soup hole.
foot and a half of water there, and
Oh,
just
okay.
a lot of soft sediment.
Right.
In that particular location, there was several feet of soft sediment
Oh,
that were
yes.
removed before we even got down to that parent material, which is what we dug that fishing hole down into, is that parent material. But there were several feet of soft sediment in that location.
Yeah,
And now you have some happy fish with
Yeah.
some happy little homes.
correct.
Great.
Correct. Yeah, it's very cool. This was the invasive species removal. In the upper photograph, the picture's taken from about the sledding hill area, looking north towards the creek. And you can't see it. It just doesn't exist. And there's literally, 100 feet of impenetrable brush right there. And then the lower left-hand photo is right after we got it all cleared and just started the restoration. The photo's a little blurry, but you can see now, you're looking easterly, and you can see from like the parking lot from Westfield all the way east to Eagle Street, whereas that you absolutely could not do before.
Yeah, those two photos on the left side are taken from approximately the same location as kind of a before and after picture.
It's a huge difference.
Correct. Here, if you're close enough, you can actually see evergreen buildings in the back, and again, you could not do that before. Then the photo on the right, the grass is starting to come back in, and we planted some oak savanna type grasses that didn't need to be mowed as regularly as maybe the park
Right.
property would need to be. And it actually creates like one of the very few pieces of shade that you could have a picnic table, or just simply hang out or rest in a nice area in the park.
Without getting beat by the sun.
Yeah, when you're at the softball game in July, you're just getting beat up. You could literally now walk a couple hundred feet and be in this very heavily shaded, oak savanna type area.
Just watch out for the frisbee golf.
Yeah, the frisbee golfers for sure. You're going to definitely be in their way. Yeah.
Just wear a helmet and you'll be fine.
Right.
So
But it's
just
a neat
beautiful
area of the park now. It was an unused portion of the park, and it's about 4.5 acres, 5 acres, I think, that the park regained. I mean, it was always the park's, but it was unused before, and now with all of these invasive species gone, it's back into park again.
And one of the things we did too, we did a little bit of grading work in that area because it was very bumpy, some rocks and stuff. So it wasn't easy to mow, which is why it never really was maintained all that well in the first place. So we did a lot of minor grading work in the area to make it mowable. So now the Parks Department can come in, once a year and mow that, and that's what really keeps that buckthorn from taking over. You got to go in there and mow it about once a year, and that keeps it down and keeps it open for the park to be able to use.
I should mention, we worked with the Parks Department as well as the city forester, who actually came out and marked all of the trees for us, and there was a lot. I mean, there's hundreds of trees that he had to mark for removal, and then we kept the ones that he deemed worthy.
Yes.
And he actually came out multiple times for us because, at first it was difficult to get in and assess the true condition of some of the trees, but after we did our initial clearing, he came in again and maybe marked another dozen trees for removal. And so what's left there should be, trees that can last a while. They're healthy, they're in good condition, and they're
Low
not
maintenance.
they're not going to fall down again. So there was definitely a number of dead trees that we took out, and some trees that were not the right species.
A lot of old brush and everything.
Yeah.
And this is a fairly recent project.
Yeah, we started midsummer 2012,
Okay.
and there's still some final restoration work at Bauman Park left to be finished up here this spring yet. So it took about almost 2 years to complete the project.
That's correct.
Excellent.
Got a little bit more. Well, here we go.
So yeah, we began in 12. One of the unfortunate things is we did encounter some contaminated sediment near the Fox. So we're downstream of Sawyer Street now. So Abe Rochland Park is right there on the north side.
Yes.
And so there's just this last, literally only 500 to 700 feet of channel. And while we had taken sediment samples in the area, we had missed the pocket of contaminated material. And it was contaminated with a petroleum type product. And so it came to the surface as a sheen, and it was fairly easy to recognize. And so then that had to be addressed. And so we went in, took a bunch more samples, understood what we were dealing with, and that's really what delayed the project into the next year. And that unfortunately was quite costly.
Yeah, I think the disposal costs just for that contaminated sediment was between $400,000 and $500,000 because that all had to be hauled to the landfill in Berlin.
Okay. Consider that a setback.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I'm not sure we mentioned was that all of this sediment was very rich, you know, it's nutrient-rich, good stuff. And it was taken out to a former fill site and was kind of used to reestablish a farm field.
Oh.
Other than the contaminated stuff.
Yes.
Correct, the non-contaminated
Yes.
stuff. So the majority of our 40,000 yards were able to go and be utilized again in a good way. It didn't wasn't just fill somewhere.
Right.
Another interesting thing I've learned is there's all kinds of good soil, bad soil, different kinds of dirt, so that's kind of interesting.
And one way to think about this too, you know, that sediment that we're removing, you know, like Matt said, it's very rich in nutrients. You know, a lot of that stuff, you know, ran off of farm fields over the last 50 years. So it's got a lot of phosphorus, it's got a lot of nitrates. I mean, I think the first year they planted it, you know, I think within a week the crops were, you know, already almost knee high. It just grew tremendously.
It was very green.
Great.
All right, moving into the City Hall Underground Detention Basin project, you know, right out here, right in front of City Hall. You know, like we've mentioned before, anybody who came to City Hall in 2013 is, you know, pretty well aware of what we had going on. The analysis for this watershed, the Division Street watershed, really began back in 2009. We had some street reconstruction projects on the north end, Prospect Central, Saratoga, Merrill, just south of Merrill Middle School. We did a lot of work in that area, and that's what started the project, the analysis off. You know, we looked at 15 to 20 different alternatives, you know, traditional detention basins, just doing storm sewer work, and you know, ended up that, you know, being able to take advantage of this large site that the city had here with City Hall and Safety Building, and you know, having a significant need for parking lot and being able to use the area underneath the parking lot as stormwater detention. Looking at the video here, you know, again, we're at a 30-minute storm, so that's, you know, a 25-year or a 4% probability. You know, that's 1.6 inches of rain in 30 minutes. So again, very significant, very intense rain. You know, you've got the before and after, you know, on both sides of the screen. Really makes a significant difference in the watershed. A little bit, you know, in the right-of-way yet down on the southern end, but making some very significant improvements in the watershed.
And I think this is the one that you can't necessarily see so much when there's a bunch of red because it is underground. So where all that water, where all that color on the map is going, it's going underneath the parking lot in City Hall.
Right, it really is. You know, it's a pretty large structure underneath.
Yes.
You know, going to that 100-year, that 1% probability storm, you know, here we are looking at 2.35 inches of rain again in that 35 minutes. You know, very significant. And there are some very significant improvements, you know, in that Jackson Street area down by the Chamber of Commerce. You know, Jackson Street is a major arterial street through the city of Oshkosh. It's, you know, it's one of only 5 bridges that cross the river. So, you know, if you're trying to get from the south side to the north side, there's only so many ways to get there. You know, so it was very important to try and keep that street much more passable. You know, and you can see the results are very significant here. Really, you know, of all the alternatives we looked at, the one we really ended up going with, you know, there's a lot of storm sewer work taking place in this watershed. Before the construction in front of City Hall started, I don't know if you remember or were here at the time, but we had a project coming up Jackson Street from down by the Pearl Avenue area, coming all the way up Jackson Street in front of the church and in front of Hardee's and coming into City Hall. You know, that's really the outlet storm sewer. That's as the water leaves the underground system, that's where it's going.
Okay.
You know, coming up in 2014, we've got some significant storm sewer work taking place on Central Street, starting just north of City Hall and going all the way up to Irving and then over to Division. So there's going to be a lot of large storm sewer going in to really put all the water into this underground system.
Right, that's kind of the next phase. I mean, you've got the end point of all the water, and this is kind of creating the ways that the water is going to get there?
Yep, that's a good way to put it. You know, we've got the, if you will, the storage place in place, and we've got the outlet for it. Now we got to get the water into it.
Okay.
You know, it's too much work to try and do in any one year, so we had to split it up into multiple years. And so it made the most sense to be able to build the structure and the outlet first, and then build the system to get the water to it. You know, I think another thing that
you really don't want to do it the other way around. If you know, you don't want to really get the water there quickly and then not have a place to store it or a place to discharge it. So there is an order.
People's basements will be where it'll
yes,
end up.
exactly. So. And it did help too. You know, 2013 being an odd year, you know, there was no major elections. You know, a lot of the other functions that really needed to be at City Hall weren't there. You know, a lot of the meetings and things other than Plan Commission and Common Council remained at the building. All the other meetings that take place here in City Hall were relocated to other facilities. You know, for example, special events moved to the fire station. I know Stormwater Utility Committee moved over to one of the university buildings. We really spread out throughout the city to try and utilize a number of other structures to take some loading off the parking lot, because we knew, you know, we were basically taking half the parking lot out of service at any one time. And, you know, half of what was left was needed for parking the official police vehicles.
Yes.
You know, so
and
there
then
wasn't.
city employees got a little extra exercise parking a couple blocks away.
Yes,
so
we did.
Perfect time during the summer, good weather, unless it was raining. But
we had a snowstorm right early in the project that we had to walk through. But other than that, it was pretty good.
yeah, an easy kind of transition, you could say.
Yeah. So you know, that's really what we're doing. Yeah, the project started on March 4th of 2013. We had some good weather to start. A couple weeks into the construction, we did get a snowstorm. You know, that does show up on the video. Again, you know, this video was just taken with little snippets from the rooftop camera that Media Services was gracious enough to relocate and look over the project to help us out. And I know it was the Media Services staff that kind of grabbed these little snippets of video and kind of stitched this together to give us an overall time-lapse look at the project. But this, you know, this website we had set up live broadcast that feed all the time. You know, so residents could jump on anytime and look at what was going on with the project.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how deep the hole actually is there when you can see all the vehicles and people walking around in it. Because from an aerial view, it's kind of hard to decipher exactly how deep it is, but you see them.
And even in the video, it's deceiving. You know, I know, you know, from the engineering offices on 3rd floor, you would look down, oh, that doesn't look so bad. But, you know, when I would go down into the project to see how the contractor is doing, and you're standing down in the bottom of that hole 25 feet below ground looking up, you're like, wow, it's deeper than it looked from up above. So, you know, it's a very good look, but it is still deceiving until you really get down in there and look at it.
Yes, and never have to worry about it collapsing on us or anything like that when we're parking our cars on the parking lot.
No, it's very structurally sound. You know, the complete design was done, you know, structurally reviewed for, you know, being able to park a semi and vehicles and everything on it. So, no, it's a solid structure.
And now you kind of wouldn't even know what was there if you didn't. If you
You
weren't around.
really don't. You know, with a winter like we had, 2013, 2014 being very cold, the telltale signs were there. You know, if you walk around the parking lot, you see about 30-inch diameter grates in the parking lot. What those are is nothing more than a air ventilation to let air out of that underground system in a major event. Because you've got a 5-foot high by 8-foot wide box culvert coming into the system and a 24-inch pipe going out. So if that box culvert's flowing full, as soon as the outlet storm sewer is submerged, there's nowhere for all the rest of that air to go. You know, so we thought about it, we're like, well, how are we going to get this out and not cause the system to kind of airlock or freeze up? So that's what we did, is we ended up putting in these 7 large openings to vent that air during a big storm event. Well, during a cold winter like we had, there was always steam coming up.
It was an interesting thing to see. It
You
really
know,
was.
the ground, 25 feet below ground, you know, it's 50, 60 degrees all the time. You know, and when it's 20 below outside, you know, that's 70, 80 degree temperature change, you know, and it's moist air down there. So that moist air is coming up through those vents, and it was freezing in the cold air, and that's where you're seeing that fog and frost forming around it.
And in addition to those manholes, there are also some filtration systems as well that the water drains in through.
Actually, yeah, the actual surface of the parking lot, if you look between City Hall and the safety building, there's some depressed areas. They got some bark wood mulch in them. We'll be getting some vegetation planted in them very soon. And that actually treats or filters the runoff from the parking lots. So as we mentioned before, when the water lands on the parking lot and it flows across the parking lot, it picks up dirt, it picks up, you know, brake dust and everything. Oil, you know, anything that drips on the parking lot ends up in those systems. So that biofilter actually filters that out. The plants will actually tie those materials up, and any nutrients, you know, phosphates, nitrates, the plants actually use them to grow, so they're removing those as well. You know, so that's how we're improving the water quality runoff from the parking lot.
Great.
The underground system itself holds about 6 acre feet. So again, you know, Matt's analogy from earlier, you know, a football field about 6 feet deep of water. That's about how much water this system holds. The system itself is about 12 feet in height, you know, so you can imagine it's about half a football field in area.
Yeah.
The total project cost was about $4.3 million. Of that, about $3.2 million was stormwater utility fund. Just under $1 million of that was general fund, parking lot improvements that were not associated with the actual construction of the underground system. And then we also did have a DNR grant for $150,000 on that project. So a little bit of a recap, you know, we talked a bit about the flooding history here in the city of Oshkosh. You know, spent a fair amount of time talking about our purposes, goals, strategies, and then really going over a lot of our recent projects, you know, looking, you know, kind of back over the last 5 years, some of the significant projects we've done. You know, the Tippler Dry Basin, the Melvin Avenue Pump Station, that traditional wet detention basin out by West Haven, that large James Road area project, the dredging project along Sawyer Creek, you know, having some significant improvements, and then the underground detention system.
And could you maybe talk about some of the future projects? What do we have planned for the next few years here?
Sure. You know, right now, actually, the Armory, the National Guard Armory Area Detention Basin project kicked off about a week or two ago. Unfortunately, Mother Nature has not been very cooperative with us, and we've been getting a lot of rain. But that's really the big project for this year, is getting that project going. That's about an 18-acre site. It'll be a fairly traditional wet detention basin, open ditch section of Campbell Creek immediately adjacent to it. So it's a fairly good-sized project. We're going to see some very significant reductions in flooding, you know, in that area north of the Armory up to 9th Avenue and, you know, getting closer to Witzel Avenue. So this works in conjunction with the Tippler project. They're both in the same watershed, kind of on different branches of the creek that come together by Lourdes. You know, so we've got two very significant projects working on reducing that flooding that we see a lot in the Witzel Avenue area.
So residents in that watershed will begin to see even more results than
Yes.
since the Tippler one.
Yes. Other projects, you know, we got the 9th and Washburn area project coming up in 2015. Looking forward out a few more years, you know, we've got another project on the north side, kind of between Jackson Street and Main Street, in the Libby Avenue area. That's, I think we're looking at about 2016, getting that project under construction. So we've got some very significant projects planned out here for the next few years.
And like you said, it really is a continuous project. Like there's no one-stop shop that you can eliminate all of the stormwater issues in Oshkosh. It's really a continuous process. As funds become available, as, you know, bids are available, and all of these things makes a big difference.
It really is. You know, like I said before, you know, it's not going to be a 5, 10, or 20-year fix. You know, we have to keep working on projects every year to keep improving things. You know, one of the things we haven't mentioned yet is, you know, the South Park area, Ohio Street, in that area, you know, significant flooding issues in that Stringham Creek watershed. We got a big planning level study going on for that one right now. So, look in the next 2 to 4 years to start seeing some projects moving forward in that watershed as well. So it does. We're continually starting new stormwater management plan analyses. We're working on implementing the recommendations of previous analyses, and we're always looking at where the next project is to try and make a big impact.
Okay, and I think one major question that everybody has is, how is this going to affect me? It's a lot of money to make these or to do these projects. So, what are some of the top reasons that people should, support these and actually know that they're important?
Really, I think one of the big things is, as we've looked at, kind of the various health and safety goals of our stormwater program. By reducing the street flooding, we are improving the ability of our emergency services staff to respond. If somebody is having a heart attack and all of their streets are under 3 feet of water, the ambulance isn't going to be able to get there. Those are the things we're trying, that's how it's going to impact everybody. If, heaven forbid, your house start on fire during a major event and the fire department can't get there because your street's underwater, that's a big impact. I think some of the lesser seen but equally important are removing that clear water discharge into the sanitary sewer system. Every bit of water that the storm sewer system can keep off of the street is that much less water that's going to get into the sanitary sewer system. That being said, there are, the inflow and infiltration issue, that's a topic for a whole nother hour-long discussion.
We'll have another presentation on that one.
Yeah, it really, it would take us another hour to talk about that. But, there are things that the city has to do, and there are things that residents and property owners have to do to resolve that issue. But as a stormwater utility, getting that water off the street is a big first step to what the city has to do.
Great.
And I think, not having your yard flooded.
Right, or your house or your basement. There is definitely a private property damage element to these storms. There was many people that had private property damage due to these, heavy storms and flooding events. And the better that we can control them, the less private property damage that'll occur out there. And like James said, even if it's not your property that gets flooded, you do want to be able to get emergency access. You don't want the streets to be flooded. But if it is your property that is being flooded, this is a very direct benefit to you, to not have your basement get flooded, to not have your property impacted. And there's damage when there's water in your home or your business or.
Yeah, I know, in the Evergreen Manor example, my conversations with Ken Arneson, I think they have had millions of dollars of damage in the past, 10, 15 years. With the event in 2012, we were just getting going on some of the projects in that area. With the heavy rains we had April 12th, 13th here in 2014, we had 5 inches of rain over the weekend. In talking with Ken Arneson regarding how things looked in his neighborhood at Evergreen Manor, they said Sawyer Creek never got above its bank. There was no creek flooding from Sawyer Creek. Westfield Street in front of Evergreen Manor was flooded, but again, it did not impact their property. And one of the things that we know we've got coming up with Westfield Street is we have a planned reconstruction in the next 3 to 5 years that'll be replacing the storm sewer, which will really take a big step to keeping that water off of Westfield Street as well. So there are so many projects that need to be done, and we just kind of have to space them out and time them out. Like Matt said earlier, you can't put the storm sewer in before you have the place to store it.
Exactly.
That Sawyer Creek dredging project, we installed numerous stormwater outfalls. We replaced all the existing outfalls into Sawyer Creek. Because we had a permit from the DNR to do all this work, we said, you know what, rather than having to get a new permit to do a storm sewer outfall again in a few years, let's do them all now, and we'll just stop 25, 50 feet from the bank, so in future years we don't have to go into that water body again and disturb it.
Ready to go.
Right, so we did a lot of, I think, proactive things to set us up. We've got the outfall all set for Westfield Street. We just got to, get to it and go with it in a few years when we do that street project.
They're all brand new. They're all sized appropriately, and they're 50-year solutions. I mean, they're there for a long time.
Excellent. So it's an ongoing project, lots to look forward to in the future here.
There's such a variety of projects that you guys have completed here. It's just amazing. You know, certainly it's unfortunate that you had tremendous flooding problems, but you've addressed them with very unique solutions, all extremely beneficial. You can see the range of things that you've accomplished. And there's others that weren't mentioned. You know, the Westfield Street area, again, we widened the bridge so that Sawyer Creek had more room to go underneath the bridge there. So it's amazing what you guys have done. It really is.
Great. Well, I think that might just about conclude. If you guys have any other final thoughts on our presentation today.
I think the last thing that we're actually going to close out with is an interview from one of the business owners located in the Campbell Creek watershed. Mr. Ron Detchen, who is one of the property owners for the Landmark Plaza, you know, more commonly known as Stein's area. You know, through the 2004-2008 storms, significant damage in that area. You know, and as Matt mentioned, the Tippler Dry Detention Basin and the big storm sewer project that led to the Tippler Dry Detention Basin, that went right around Landmark Plaza. So that project had a very direct, very significant impact on the Landmark Plaza property, and that's one of the things that you know, Ron is going to talk about a little bit, and you know, we'll let Ron say it in his own words. He's very well spoken, outspoken at times, but very well spoken individual, and you know, I've worked with Ron since I joined the city 8 years ago in trying to implement several of these projects, and you know, we had to get some easements from them to construct the Landmark conveyance project. You know, so I've worked very closely with Ron for several years in trying to make some of these projects a reality. And you know, from my standpoint, it's good to see the benefit that they are seeing.
Definitely.
So I think, you know, that was the only kind of closing comment I think I'll leave with that.
Great. We'll take a look at the video and then we'll come back to us and go ahead and close it out then.
All right, sounds good.
Between me and a partner of mine, we own quite a bit of real estate that is actually in the stormwater areas. One of the properties is where Stein Garden Centers is, and we've put that underwater with the help of the community 3 separate times. We've really suffered some massive damage. Additionally, I own a property on Ohio Street that in, I think it was 2008, also flooded out, and that's where Imprimet is located. So we've really been through some problems and seriously millions of dollars worth of damage to our properties. Over the years, we've asked the city to help us, and I won't say it fell on deaf ears, but it really fell to a very slow process. Once Mr. Roloff came on board, what happened is we began to see an intent to correct the problems. And we've done a lot of things. We've bermed our properties, we've put concrete walls around them, we've put huge pumping systems in. But when Mr. Roloff came on board, and with the addition of some other people in the planning department, action was actually taken to stop some of the damage areas, to stop some of the water coming downstream for us, to delay it so that it wouldn't come to our property. We've had rainfalls in the last 2 years that were certainly equal to those that flooded us before, and yet we have no flooding. Now we have great drainage around the property on the frontage road. We have good surface movement. We were actually able to renovate that complete building and give it a new face, bring in new tenants, and we wouldn't have been able to do that if we had not, and I will say this, solved, knock on wood, the water incursion problem. It's gone for that property. I think what the city's doing is an exceptionally good thing. I think they finally have true direction. It's kind of like management by objective. The objective should in fact be, let's keep the dangerous stormwater out of people's properties. I think the Wisconsin statute refers to water as the common enemy. And it is. Water is a great thing, but when it's in your basement or in your property, it's a bad thing. And I think the city is doing an exceptionally good job, and I think they just should stay on target with management by objective. The objective is to stop water from becoming an enemy, and I think they're doing a good job in that direction.
You know, really, you know, the biggest thing I want, you know, people to keep in mind is, you know, this is not a instantaneous fix. There's no magic bullet to make all of our stormwater issues go away. It's going to take time. We understand there are some significant flooding issues in some of the watersheds yet. We mentioned Stringham Creek earlier. Like I said, we're working on the analysis for that one. We just ask that residents maintain patience with us. Obviously, if you have an event and you're experiencing some things, please do let us know, because we don't always know where all of the issues are. There are some projects that have been shuffled around and moved up in the capital program because property owners made us aware of, hey, we've got a long-standing issue here, and because they had never reported it to us, we didn't know about it. So that's one of the biggest things. If you're having an issue, please do let us know about it. We'll always come out and take a look at the storm sewer system. Over time, the dirt and stuff off the street, it will settle out in the storm sewers too, and maybe they just need to be cleaned to open things up. I think another big thing to really keep in mind as summer comes about, grass clippings. The street is not where you blow your grass clippings, because that goes into the storm sewer and clogs up the storm sewers. Blow those grass clippings back into your yard, or pick them up and discard them. I think as fall comes around again, leaf droppings. The city of Oshkosh, you put your leaves on the terrace. You don't put them in the street, because if they're in the street and it rains, they're going to wash into the storm sewer, or they're going to plug those catch basin inlets and not get the water off the street. So it's just some of the little things like that we really want residents to be aware of, how those impact not only the city system but all of their neighbors as well.
Excellent. Any final thoughts, Matt?
Well, I think that you have such a great story to tell, and the people that haven't had the work done in their area, again, James had mentioned be patient. If they talk to someone that has been in an area where work has been done, I'm sure they will tell you what dramatic improvements have been made because of the work that they've done in the stormwater utility. And that's why they should continue to support it, is because they see their neighbor, tremendous improvement, and that's coming to them, but it's going to take some time.
Wonderful. Well, looks like that's our conclusion there. Thank you both gentlemen so much for coming in and telling us all about the stormwater efforts. I know I personally have not only learned a lot about the projects that we discussed, but about stormwater in general. So thanks again for coming in, and hopefully we'll hear soon about those future projects.
Well, thanks for the time, Emily.
Definitely.
Thanks for having us.
For more information on stormwater, you can go to the City of Oshkosh's website, ci.oshkosh.wi.us, and go to the Stormwater Utility page under the Public Works Department. So thanks again for joining us for this presentation on stormwater in your city.